What's up, friends? Did you miss a bit of Battle Brothers? I imagine you would have. So, this is going to technically be episode 41 of the last playthrough. I didn't want to leave you guys with no Battle Brothers content, so what I'm going to do is I'll do a weekly, hour-long playthrough of one of the two of my offline campaigns that I've been using to play around with different builds and concepts within the game. So this week I'll do an hour of the experimentals, and next week I'll show you an hour of the test subjects. And basically, the short thing between the difference between the two is that with the experimentals I've gone for a 4-archer backline and violated a principal rule of building archers I've never done before, which is giving them 2 range weapon specializations. The 4 archers here have got archery mastery and throwing weapon mastery, which has had mixed results. The test subjects has a 2-archer backline, and these are pure archers. These are guys who only have bow mastery, and they are quicker, and they're better pure archers than my experimental archers, but obviously they are useless against armor, whereas the experimentals have some usefulness with their thrown axes. The other difference is, in the experimentals I've got the 2 maces, 2-handed maces, whereas in the test subjects I don't. And that just reconfirmed for me that having two-handed maces in the front line is absolutely mandatory. There's also an interesting thing I was trying to find out, which was when I have these 4 archers in the back line. Let's introduce you to the lads. So this is, let me just get them their primary weapons out so you can get an idea of what I'm trying to do with these guys. The other thing to note is that almost everybody has direwolf armor attachments. That wasn't a conscious thing, it just turned out that I was doing a lot of missions against direwolves, and I just got loads of their pelts. I even have 1 coat of plates with the lighter armor attachment, which is just fantastic. And one other thing I want to point out, I fucking love wild men. Wild men are amazing. And when you get a wild man with iron lungs, you can even make him a Zweihander even if he doesn't have great melee skill. He's just got so much fatigue. Look at this. That's a 350 armor coat of plates, and it could be even more. And he's got 74 fatigue, which is not bad, especially with iron lungs, with 350 body armor. Fucking incredible. Ulfert is an absolute tank. He doesn't hit as often as I would like, but he's pretty good. Janold and Sigvard are my 2 superstars. These guys do so much damage, but the fatalities in this playthrough have been very low. Now, admittedly, I have been save scumming. I mean, it's an offline campaign. But I haven't had to save scum more than once or twice. And it's largely down to these 2, who are 2 of my best guys right from the start. You can see that they're both farmhands who happen to have stars in melee skill. And just being able to stun lock and debuff enemies with daze is amazing. And you've got 2 pretty standard Zweihanders. And then on the outside flanks, I wanted to go for flails because I had guys who didn't have the most amazing melee skill or fatigue. But in this setup here, I'm light on armor destruction. If I could change anything here, I would switch out the 2 flails for warhammers. Now, let's get to my archers. Because I was playing around with something quite different, I haven't leveled either of the 2. Okay, there's 2 types. So Oscar and Falk. They are both archer betas. So the beta is the beta type, which has quick hands, no bags and belts, and I took fearsome. I took fearsome because I'm hoping to break the enemy archers quicker, the ones that I hit, or to give them some usefulness with their bows against armored targets. But that counter synergizes with the throwing whip mastery. I mean, if I'm using a throwing weapon, I'm just trying to shatter armor, which is pretty good. So 27 to 44 armor damage, and increase that by 30% when throwing it at 2 squares is pretty good. And my archer alphas do have bags and belts, but they don't have berserk, which was a mistake. So all my archers have fearsome, whereas in retrospect I don't think fearsome is necessary on your archers. It's great to break the morale of enemy archers, but they typically die in 2 to 3 shots from a warbow anyway. And the logic for fearsome was always, if you're shooting at an armored target, you only have to do 1 point of damage to make their resolve roll. But when I'm with this archer build, I'm throwing axes against an armored target. So fearsome isn't really that necessary. I could have freed up this fearsome point here for berserk on that throwing weapon. So the other thing to notice is that, as you might expect, my archers are the starting companion, And then very early on, because I knew I was going to be taking throwing mastery, I was able to hire... Okay, so, well, I've got the 2 witch hunters now, but they were hired around day 150. But there is this shepherd who unbelievably started with a point in range skill and had, I think, 45 or 46, which I knew he was weak, but I wish I'd captured some footage of it. But I can tell you that using throwing weapons at lower levels in the back lines is remarkably effective. The plus 30 to hit chance from 2 tiles, it's actually a plus 20, you know, makes, even when they've got like 50 range skill, that's a 70% chance when they're throwing at 2 tiles. So they were pretty good in the early game. Now, let's get into some actual gameplay, enough theory crafting and talking, and show you what these guys are like in action. Oh, and then there is Otwin, my swordsman. I really wanted to try the lunge, and lunge is interesting. It's very cool for closing a gap, but as you get more fatigued and your initiative drops, it drops exponentially in damage. So it's really just an opener and closing a gap. But it's pretty cool because it allows you to lunge in and still attack. The other thing I like about this build is he's a pretty average brother, as you can see. He doesn't even have a point in melee skill, but he is a wild man who's strong, so he's got a lot of fatigue. And he's determined, so he always starts with 80 melee skill. I wanted to give this guy with strong nimble because I wanted to test whether... Okay, so you see nimble there, it's lowered exponentially by the total penalty up to and above 15. I wondered whether strong would turn that 15 into 25, but it does not, because here we have 18 points of body armor and he takes 44% of hit point damage. Now, interestingly, I didn't take Colossus on him, which was a mistake as well. I mean, this playthrough's been full of mistakes. If I could change anything about this build, I think I could probably do... What can I do without here? Arguably dodge. But then again, dodge is giving him, what, 15% of... It's almost 15 additional melee defense and range defense. And he's very hard to hit. And this, I suppose you could say underdog, because you can play him carefully. He's in the center of the formation, so he's typically not surrounded by more than 2 people at once anyway. Maybe I could swap out underdog. Backstabber. Anyway, let's just grab a mission. What you got for us? Goblins. I don't want to fight goblins. Goblins are just a bummer to fight. Let's go find some heavy armor. Well, let's see, we've got a decent amount of food. Grab some more food here. Let's head out into the wilderness and see if we can find some orcs. I want to fight against some heavily armored targets to show you how my thrown weapon archers can handle them. And one thing that is worth considering with the thrown weapons is just the psychological effect on you as a player of how satisfying it is to throw weapons, and that wonderful thunking sound it makes when they hit an enemy. It's just so satisfying. Okay, we've got a week worth of food, we've got a week worth of celery. What have you got for us here? Yeah, why not? We'll take an escort and see what attacks us on the way there. So it's day 237. I've already been through a Civil War late game crisis as the first one, and I think the second one was Undead, which we got through. It recently just ended. And if I was playing this normally, I suppose I should just point out here that I've got a Detailm here who's a hammer specialist. He was the companion who has the 2 stats here, the one and the one there, who you typically make a bannerman or a sergeant, but I got another wild man who was even better. I thought I'd make him a backline pole arm user as opposed to a shield breaker or a billman, and it's been very, very underwhelming, especially just because he doesn't have great melee skill. But like, demolish armor is pretty cool, but it's only really good in the later game, at which point I think a shield breaker with a 2-handed axe, especially if you consider the fact that I was lucky enough to get my hands on this weapon. I mean, so this is 175 to 260, so the armor destruction is obviously not as much, that's like half, but it's still very, very good. And overall I think that if I had made Detailm a shield breaker, he'd be a lot more versatile. With this particular companion. I think he's tailor-made to be turned into a shield breaker. He'll have around 80 melee skill at level 11. You can probably get more, but he'll have 50 range skill. So he'll be passable with a crossbow. And then when it comes time to fighting, he can break shields and use a one-handed axe, especially if you can squeeze in fast adaptation into this build order. Which you can, if instead of making him a heavy armor user, you make him a nimble, big hit point, which would have, you know, suited him perfectly. Anyway, so that's another mistake. But that was the point of these experimentation offline campaigns, is to try different build orders. And then I just happened to find myself a bowyer with 2 stars in range skill. He's going to replace one of these guys. Probably Horst. Or most likely Falk. Falk isn't that great with only 82. But the one last thing I'll say about those archer betas, the ones who have borderline not acceptable archery skill, is that you give them archery mastery, and because they are in a battery of 4 archers, your 2 primary archers can use quick shot, but the main function and the main thing I want out of my archers is killing enemy archers, and when I'm doing that I'm using aimed shot anyway, which helps to offset the lower range skill and the lower fatigue that some of the, you know, weaker archers might have. So, which is a long way of saying that when it comes time to hunt for archers, I'm a lot less discriminate in who I'm going for. And I'm a lot more willing to just to sort of bend the old rules a bit as to what I want from an archer. Okay, let's go fight these bandits. Anybody need leveling up? That's not a... that's what I wanted. Okay, everyone is already either fully leveled. Cheers, boys. Let's see if we can't maybe... full of treasure. Moldy shelter. Let's take a look for weapons. Nothing particularly good. And that's too expensive. Okay, what do we got here? A leader, some marksmen, and many raiders. Okay, so this is gonna be a good example of what I'm talking about with using the archers. I'm also beginning to wonder whether I can do away with anticipation on my archers. It occurs to me that perhaps the intention of anticipation is that you would actually take it on your front line. Because your guys in the back line have a fair amount of protection by the fact that they are behind a bunch of guys. I'm going to wait here and see if this guy moves forward. He's moving back, which is interesting. Fucking hell. 32% chance is pretty high, but hey, when you're fighting marksmen in the day, that's what happens. So look at the defensive numbers here on Otwin the swordsman, but this is dodge primarily. It's a 59 melee defense. It's interesting now with someone who's got dodge like this. I don't think you actually want to use shield wall, because yes, it gives you more range defense, but it starts working away at his fatigue, which then lowers dodge. Let's just check the numbers now. That's 59 and 42. If you use shield wall, that goes all the way up to 67, but then that lowers that to 9. So at a certain point, using shield wall arguably could become less good than the passive running bonus of the other skill. It's like 34% is not bad to be shooting at that backline guy. On a subsequent playthrough at some point, I'm going to experiment with not taking anticipation on my backline. I think that my backline guys with points in range defense and just nimble should be enough to keep them alive against enemy archers. I do tend to think that the primary threat to my archers are other archers. If they are in melee contact with something, then things have gone horribly wrong. Fucking hell, these marksmen don't miss, man. That was a 7% and that was a 5%, and they both hit. So far with these marksmen, we've had a 30% hit. There's the first miss, finally. A 35, a 7, and a 5. Fucking marksman, man. I mean, like, 32% is not bad at all. 229s. Also, because of this archery, the fact that I don't have spare quiver of arrows, spamming isn't worth it. You just got to take aim shots the whole time. I guess one other thing I should talk about is sergeants and bannermen. So for a while I've been running both classes that both use raise morale. The bannerman who has just the banner, and the sergeant who doesn't have the banner, and you can give him kind of any weapon. I'm fairly certain now that I don't need to do that anymore. I think I can get away with just a sergeant. And my reasoning for that is that there's the 4 square AoE of the increase of morale. And when I'm fighting a big group of undead, which I'll do at some point this week or next week, I'll show how, as long as you're careful with your setup, like look, 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. So Sigmar isn't getting the extra morale. So if this was a fight against undead with ghosts, that would be no good. But as long as you just tighten up the formation, it is possible to keep your entire group under the effects of the banner, which gives everybody a better chance of resisting. And then there is this wonderful consumable item here called Lionheart Potion. I forget how to make it, but I think it is adrenaline and unhold heart. Increases resolve by 40, so that turns that 112 into 150, giving everybody 15 resolve, and they all have base 50 resolve, giving them all 65 resolve, which makes them pretty damn good at resisting ghosts screaming at them and witches trying to, you know, mind control them. I do still think that in this sort of situation, this is the right thing to do. I realize it's dull, and I always feel bad for you guys having to watch this protracted archery battle, but we're not quite to the point where we can just blindly walk towards these raiders. They have some weapons like those picks who can still rip apart this armor friggin' quick. But you'll see, we got 1 or 2 more marksmen to kill, and then they'll start coming forward. So I was very pleased to see how much extra defense we're getting from Nimble on the swordsman. Overall, I've been very encouraged by the survivability of dodgy, nimble guys with high hit points in the front lines. I don't think they compare to your super heavy tanks, but I don't think they're intended to. I think it's particularly important because when it comes to the peasant horde playthrough, it's not going to be possible to have, you know, what, like 10 or 12 frontline hedge knights. It's going to be too expensive and it'll take too long. I mean, it's possible eventually, but I think especially in the beginning it's going to be super important to have the majority, if not at least half of your frontline go for high hit points and nimble, because then all they need, as you can see, is a full face coif and some basic mail, which is very doable by day, you know, 100 something, even before that, and they got decent survivability. Give them nimble as well, they should be fine. Now, I also experimented with a spearman build. A spearman who sits on the back line and who functions much like a bullhook user. But he uses a spetum, and then he can go to a one-handed spear when he has to rotate someone out of the front line. But It's been okay using the AoE stab with the speedsum, but that's really its only trick. And a shield breaker or a dedicated bullman is far superior. Nice headshot, Horst. Nice. Okay, just one or two more archers and they're going to come at us. Come at me, Brigand Raider nerd. As soon as they start running at us on that turn, they'll be able to come 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4. We will on that turn grab recover, and then on the next turn start smashing them. I would point out that with this group of lads that I have here, they're a fairly cheap warband. I've got a couple of wild men, and like stat-wise, a lot of them aren't great, but I've given them weapon types and builds that have made them surprisingly okay. So for someone like Otwin, my swordsman, I'm still going to replace him eventually. But I mean, this warband came online, if you will, pretty quick. And I was quite pleased with that. Okay, so now this side of the formation can start recovering. Okay, here they come. Headshot. Oh, come on. Oh yes, one thing I should point out, you might have been surprised to have seen that my flail raiders, where's Sigmar or Biani? So looking at this perk order, the one thing that leaps out for a two-handed flail user is that fearsome is not needed. The reason for that is because for quite a while I was using him with a three-headed flail, and fearsome with a three-headed flail is amazing in some situations. Like 20% of the time, it's amazing every time, but the other 80% of the time, fearsome with a three-headed flail just wasn't good enough. You would have to make him a duelist, which just, again, has that AoE issue. I was playing with the idea of a build I would call the Torturer, which is someone who specializes in the three-headed, one-handed flail and fearsome and looks to break morale. But against like a fully armored target, you just don't do enough hit point damage. A lot of times you aren't even doing any hit point damage, and you'd have to give him duelist. So I feel like that's a little bit niche. Also bear in mind, all the undead can't have their morale broken. So like a big two-handed flail, that's just better for the good damage numbers. I might consider a couple of torturers for morale breaking purposes in my peasant horde build. A torturer is another type of build that you can do very cheaply, because they can be a light armored dodgy person like a swordsman, which will also help with the synergy of giving them higher initiative, because your guys who you primarily look to break morale need to have higher initiative to act before the target whose morale you're trying to break anyway. I do wish they would change the programming a bit. Like in this situation, these raiders should know that their ranged fighters are just done for, and it's pointless for them to just keep standing back now. They should have come forward. It should be, even like when the battle starts, I have more ranged ability damage. So like, I wish the AI would be programmed to know it's not an archery battle that it can win, and these guys should come to the front line anyway. At least now with all 4 of my archers shooting at their marksmen, this should be over pretty soon. Any second now. Oh, that one looked good. Oh, one more. One other thing that was amazing on this playthrough was that I couldn't believe my eyes. I did a caravan escort mission was the 3 skull. It paid me like 2,000 gold. That was on day like 130, 140. It was in the middle of the Civil War, but I wasn't ready to join it yet. And the place that was well supplied had a Fletcher, and I bought 2 war bows for 2,800 gold each. I couldn't believe my eyes. I've never seen them that cheap before. I was like, oh fuck yes. That was almost all of my money at the time, but oh, I couldn't believe it. In like 1,000, almost 1,500 hours of Battle Brothers, I've never seen a war bow that cheap. Come on, Raiders, come forward already. See how good Nimble is? No hit point damage. Like, I could start going forward here, but there's really no incentive to. Fuck it. Other than I'm bored, let's go. Finally. So typically, as soon as I lost patience and I moved forward, sorry Alwyn, he's like, charge! He looks behind him. Guys, we're charging. Headshot. Looks like we're not really going to be able to show off the throwing weapons, but... Oh yes, I didn't even mention, the throwing weapons on my archers are amazing against dire wolves, against goblin wolf riders, against any enemy that runs and hits your front line really quickly. They are amazing against those enemy types. .72, look at that. Oh, and the spiders as well. The throwing weapons are amazing against spiders. The spiders are surprisingly hard to hit, so the extra hit chance is very good. You see how Otwin takes exactly 0 hit point damage from Nimble. So I think what happened there is the javelin hits him first. It calculates the armor for the damage reduction from the armor first, and then Nimble calculates against the full damage numbers and reduces the hit point damage that he would have taken accordingly. Hence why he's not taking any hit point damage there. I probably even have that wrong, but long story short, that's very good. Okay, so here's lunge. Isn't that good? It is fatigue intensive though. 19 fatigue is quite a lot. Like I could lunge forward here, but then that triple surrounds me, which is no good. See, here's where I want a Zweihander to get in there. So I want Ulfert to get in there. But this is also kind of the problem with Otwin. Look, in that turn, he's pretty much one and done. So because we killed that guy, it didn't... Okay, Rugged Circuit for 34, just killed him. I wish I would give you the hit point damage numbers, because with the extra damage from dual wield, from double grip and duelist, 54 to 78 is pretty damn good for a fencing sword, I think. Let's get forward now with my thrown weapons. Alwyn, what are you? You're a Zweihander. Genold is my mace user. Björn. Shot. Sigma is a flail user. I think this raider will be taken care of by Otwin, so I can move Sigma up here on this flank. Brigand Raider. Sorry, buddy. Rip. Crunch. Dead. Nice dodging, lads. Great job avoiding damage there. Look at that, 62% chance to hit. It's not bad. It's way better than it would be with his bow. That's pretty good damage. It almost wrecked that coif he was wearing. Oof. See how much better that is than just the three-handed, the three-headed flail. I still wish I'd kept those three-headed flails in my inventory. I would still want them for my flail users. So, like, for example, if they're going up against undead with a bunch of ghosts, then there is no better weapon than the three-headed flail. Ulfert, triple kill. Nope, no kill. Can I lunge at him from here? I cannot. Can I lunge from here? I can, interesting. But see how little, okay, it's a very low hit chance and it's going to do very little damage because I don't have a lot of fatigue. Whereas a normal swing is actually pretty good. The one thing I want to think about with that swordsman is whether he's better off using the fencing sword or the noble sword. The numbers on the noble sword will be a bit higher, but then you don't get the extra utility of that lunge skill. But I don't even know if I'm that impressed by lunge. Okay, fine, it lets you attack twice in the turn in which you use it. Maybe the way to go is quick hands, and then you lunge forward with the fencing sword, and then you quick hands to the noble sword. Oh, whoopsie, an extra attack there. I love my two-handed maces. Oh, they're so good. Thunk. Ah, thunk. Ah. So satisfying. Level ups? Nope. I can kind of leave this experimentals group where it is with the setup, but I do actually want to make some changes. I want to replace these flail users. Well, actually, do I need to? Do I really need to? Maybe I'll just commit to the setup that I've got. The 4 archers in the back line. I can start replacing them slowly. Like someone like Falk definitely needs to be changed. He, instead of fearsome, he should have had bags and belts, and his range skill isn't good enough. I mean, like looking at the setup, two-handed flail, great sword, mace, swordsman, mace, sword. I don't think I have enough armor destruction. Maybe for someone in the center position, instead of a swordsman, if he had better attack, I could, you know, just consider him to be a outright duelist. Because a duelist with a warhammer does fucking sick damage. Thing is, now this is lowering my initiative too much. You can even argue that he doesn't need the shield. He's got enough defense just from dodge. So passively he'll have 17 range defense and 40 something melee defense just from... No, but he has to carry a shield. Let's be smart. Okay, I've got one 3-headed flail. I need to buy one more. What you got for me? Destroy sharp teeth layer. Yeah, fine. Hopefully it's an orc camp. Northwest, you say? Of Hochwell. How's that northwest? Oh yes, that is northwest. Okay, I'm a dumbass. Let's see. Join us by the campfire. Yada yada yada. Ooh, that's nice and cheap. I can make profit off of that. That's nice and cheap too. Like armor wise, I'm kind of not really stuck, but I'm in a position where my frontline guys have okay armor. I could do better armor for them, but it's really only the wild men who have the fatigue to use anything higher. So just the Hauberks with the wolf pelts, it's pretty good. Like someone like Bjorn, look, he's got 70 fatigue only. I feel like he would have been better off having been a swordsman type build. You know, with just nimble. I kind of get the feeling that for future playthroughs, I'm going to make my mace guys. There's no reason the mace guys can't also be nimble, dodgy types. They're in the center of the formation. It's like these guys here, the guys who are going to be surrounded by at least 3 and multiples. They're the ones who really need to be super heavy armor knights, you know? I'm just trying to think, like, if I'd restarted, what would I most want out of my companion? Typically, because it's so hard to get a 2 melee skill brother, I would think of making him a Warhammer user and have him eventually in this position. But if I do it all over, I think I would take this mace guy. I would have turned Bjarni, like having an 89 melee skill, 2-handed mace user, right from day one. Well, he's obviously not 89 at day one, but he's, you know, he's the most accurate you have. And stunning the most high-value target that the enemy has for every single battle across, you know, the thousands of battles you're going to have is going to save you a lot of pain. Ugh, it's goblins puke. Okay, that's not so bad. It's mini wolf riders and just a few ambushes. Okay, good. I hope what happens is... Okay, this is definitely not a noble sword usage. I hope that the wolf riders run straight into our front lines. Because then you can see the effectiveness of the thrown weapons right from the beginning. Wait, isn't 20 melee defense, 20 melee defense? Yep. This, by the way, is Oswald the Odds Keeper. So it's basically a heater shield combined with a kite shield. It's bloody great. I think a nighttime fight is fine. The fact that it's a nighttime fight should really convince these wolf riders they need to hit our front lines on turn 1. Okay, perfect. So they weren't able to hit my front lines. That lets me move everybody up, which is kind of perfect. Okay, it's only 2 little ambushes. Shot, Oscar. I'm quite happy to put my 2-handed weapon users. If I put the flail guy here... See, I don't want to take that position. so all these squares here are covered. So the archers are fine. So putting my flail user there means I'm not going to be able to use thresh. I needed to keep that little angle tight. But honestly, it's another thing with the flail users. It's a very rare time that you're actually able to use thresh. I feel like the big round swing from the Warhammer is better. Okay, so just to compare, 46% with the warbow, 54 with the thrown weapon. And that would have been way better for us with a thrown weapon if it was daytime. Very nice damage, as you can see. So 49 with a regular shot, 58. And you can't tell me that's not satisfying. Oh, yes, Sigma! Kill! Oh, damn it, it'll fit. I really believe that a stunned target should have, you know, like a 40% reduction in melee defense. Or you should actually have 0 melee defense. You shouldn't be able to defend yourself when you're stunned. But for balance reasons, I can understand how they wouldn't want to do that. Because otherwise, you would just have, you know, a front line of nothing but mace users. Or hell, imagine an 18-strong peasant horde using nothing but maces. Any group less than 18 wouldn't be able to do much to you. Come on, you little green fucks, come at us. Let's see what they do. I'm very prepared to run at them. These little gobbos are very weak. Oh, they all turn over. Okay, fine. There we gotta be careful. Get a shield out. That little fucker can pull a dagger out in a split second. I also wish one thing they need to really implement is to give a switch weapon button. Like having to open the inventory like that. Like this is super annoying. Like I've seen it in some RPGs where you have like you have two slots. You have a primary weapon slot and a secondary weapon slot, and then you just press a certain button just to flick between the two. This is Otwin, my swords master. Yeah, see, fighting at night is always difficult. Is this going to be a split? Oh, that's my flail nerd. Good throw. I feel like I haven't yet been able to show off the usefulness of the throwing weapons, but I think you guys get the idea. We need a battle against some orc warriors. Well, I think what we'll probably show it off the very best would be a battle against just wolf riders during the day. Job. Now that I think about it, this having to open up the inventory to change weapons is annoying the shit out of me. One thing I will say about having 4 archers that all use throwing weapons over the course of a campaign, it gets very expensive with your ammunition. So in situations like this, when the battle is won, I tend to not use the throwing weapons. It's just expensive. So I want to check out if there are mods yet for Battle Brothers, because if there are, then that whole switch alternate weapon would be the first thing I would want on a mod. And honestly, probably the only mod I would want. I still want the game to be as close to vanilla as possible until I'm actually able to finish it. And then we can start getting a bit goofy with the mods. Nasty green little fucks. I still want to get some levels on Heinrich, but really until there's some zombies or something a bit lower level, it's just too dangerous. He needs fatigue, he needs hit points, he needs a mini skill. So I have found that I always used to take Colossus on my frontline guys for the extra. I used to think of it as basically a, you know, give you 15 to 20 free hit points skill. But I mean, it hasn't been that necessary, you know, like 62 hit points is really low for Sigmar, but eventually he'll get up to like level 20, 25, so add, and I keep taking 1 hit point there. It's alright. And as long as I'll make sure that I keep him away from Warhammer users, that's not too bad. One thing I do want to experiment with is taking Nimble on each and every single one of my frontline guys. Because, for example, someone like Sigmar here, who doesn't have a lot of hit points, if you want to give him more hit points, you can give him straight hit points from Colossus, or you can give him effective hit points from Nimble. So, like, I mean, this goes all the way down to 40%. But if you think of it, so forget what Nimble says now. If the skill only said, just flat out, reduce all damage to hit points by 40%, would you still take it? I think that's pretty damn good. It wouldn't quite, because look, so Colossus gives you 25% hit points, whereas Nimble gives you 40% effective hit points. For someone like Sigmar, who I'm not going to throw a lot of plus points into hit points in those first 11 levels, you could actually well make the argument that Nimble would be more effective for him. I do wonder whether Nimble would override the 10 hit point damage minimum that Warhammers inflict. I think it would actually. That's one thing I need to experiment with. If any of you have tried that, please let me know whether you've found effectiveness from taking Nimble even on your frontline guys. I was thinking about it because during the Civil War in this mission, one of the enemy sergeants was using very heavy armor and he had Nimble. So he still was probably only getting 40% benefit, but it made him very, very tough. Especially if you consider the fact that I don't take Unbreakable on my frontline guys. Indomitable, sorry. I love my offensive skills so much. But like for Bjarni here, he certainly doesn't need fearsome. I absolutely could have given him indomitable, but he doesn't have the fatigue. Unlocks, grants 50% damage reduction and immunity to being stunned. So indomitable on someone like Otwin, who's already got nimble, could be. See, the thing is, there's so much more that I can still try. Battle Brothers is a special game. It's got so much depth. Whoops. Let's click. Buff 6. Don't need any of this stuff as backup, honestly. I've already got 2 sets here. It's a pity that this footman's armor has that unhold upgrade on it. But I remember getting that footman's armor very, very early on, and I used it for quite a while, but it's too heavy. So this is the experimentals, and the first thing you're going to notice about the test subjects when you look at the group of them, where the experimentals have wolf armor, the test subjects all have unhold upgrades, mostly the backline really. And I have found that for the backline, that unhold upgrade is by far the best. Because what is it really that tends to ruin my archers? It's an enemy crossbowman getting lucky and hitting them with a crossbow shot, which the unhold armor upgrade completely negates. Okay, where's some orcs is? Nowhere. Okay, it's been 15 minutes of an episode. I think I've given a decent showing of the experimentals. They're interesting, but they've got a lot of weak holes and a lot of things I want to change about them. But the point of it was experimentation, and that's what it was. Okay, so just to recap, flail users on the outside, greatsword users here. I'm just thinking in terms of what I'm going to be doing for the playthroughs when the DLC comes out. Overall, I do like these more flexible archers. I've always hated doing this. So whenever he's using his bow, then throwing mastery is a dead perk. Whenever he's throwing weapons, bow mastery is a dead perk. But it occurred to me that, yeah, fine, I mean, that is the case, but no more so than with quick hands. If you have someone who doesn't have to use quick hands that turn, then that's a dead perk point. So it's not the end of the world. And I like the versatility. Now, there is, though, an argument to be made, and we'll experiment with this next week with the test subjects. On a pure archer who doesn't have throwing weapons, the big problem for a pure archer always is when he has to shoot an orc warrior with full armor, he does nothing. But I think if you're a bit more careful and tactical and you use weight, and like let's say my archer wants to go first, but all the enemies have armor, just wait, let your front line go, attack them, wreck the armor, then the archer goes. And then, you know, the lack of throwing weapon mastery is not so much of an issue. But then you have a situation where that pure archer, let's say, you know, dire wolves run right into the front line, and they're super hard to hit, and then those archers do almost nothing. Whereas these archers can flick to a thrown weapon and be very effective against them. I like it. I like the versatility. Okay. Thanks for watching, friends, and please let me know about all your thoughts on this theory crafting. Particularly, I'm interested to hear what you guys think about whether the particular setup I have here has enough armor destruction with this weapon setup. I tend to lean to the fact that I'm a little light on armor destruction. If I could tweak this setup here, I would switch out the flails for warhammers, and then I think you've got almost the kind of setup I'm going to want to run on my next playthrough. I'll switch out the swordsman from the start with a dagger master, and then the guy in the front can either be another Zweihunter for the use of split, because the dagger master is great, but he runs into damage problems in the late game. But that's fine. You still need a reserve in the front line and a dagger master. Even in the super late game, I would want the dagger master when I'm fighting like a hedge knight or a champion. But when I'm fighting undead, then the dagger master is no good. So, let me know what you think about whether this setup has enough armor destruction. I don't think it does. But primarily, I'm interested in what your thoughts are on these versatile archers. Forget the fact that I haven't leveled them properly. I think the archer betas are the closest to how I would want to level them. Just imagine, instead of fearsome, this had bags and belts. I'd have the extra throwing axes, quick hands, extra space. With this here, you can even argue for carrying a support item. I think 15 throwing weapons is probably enough for anything but the biggest battle. So yeah. And what do you think of my swordsman? I know his melee skill isn't high enough, but I think I can make the argument for switching out Underdog for Indomitable. And then he's not going to have the hit points. Okay, anyway, yeah. So I want to know what you guys think about the armor destruction numbers here, but primarily, what do you think of these these versatile archers? Okay, thanks for watching, friends, and I'll see you next week Saturday. We'll give you guys an hour of gameplay from the test subjects. Until then, see you next time.